This week in the Phase 3 of alpha testing, we got access to the Herondar zone. There we go. I'm not going to go over the story beats at all, but basically the end of the zone is going to have you facing off against these like light corrupted plant people. And it's going to bring you to the dungeon, the Blinding Vale, which is what we're going to go over in today's video. Now, the Blinding Vale will not be a Mythic Plus dungeon in the first season. I really doubt that's going to change. Normally, I'm all like, everything's subject to change on alpha, but they've announced the dungeon pool. We already know that it's not going to be, and I can't imagine Blizzard's going to make any kind of swap. So this will be a Season 2 dungeon. Anyways, jumping right in, there are a couple of fairly annoying mobs in my opinion. I'm not like a big fan of the start of this dungeon. There's some of these casters that will randomly cast bolts, and then you have these lashers that cast light bloom pollination, which gives everything within its radius a massive like damage buff, which is pretty bad until the shield is broken. It's going to be a priority kick, chances are, when the dungeon does come around, so you definitely want to keep an eye out. There are any of these flowers that have like the golden face. If they have like the golden face on them, they are dangerous. The rest of the area just kind of has some like melee guys who port. They're similar to the guys in Ecodome that'll like randomly port behind some of your targets. Not the Rune Stalkers, the phase, is it the phase blades? But they port behind random DPS even if you have aggro, so that's like to me really annoying. I wish Blizzard would stop with those teleporting mobs. I don't think they're enjoyable. Especially for like a tank, and then for DPS, like if you're targeting one and it ports behind you, you're just like annoyed because you're not hitting it. If you're a caster, it cancels your cast, which kind of ruins the rhythm. But anyways, you have some guys who like will knock your group back and do a tank buster, and then you have these giant Spore Blight Belchmen who just do some AoE swirls and have like a nice, it's like a nice beefy target. So I always like these kind of mobs because with class design, generally speaking, you have some type of classes that enjoy hitting into a beefier target to maintain stacks of like haste, main stat, funnel, or whatever, prio dam. It's a all good stuff. Anyways, you'll keep progressing through a lot of these mobs, just a bunch of lashers, different combinations of them throughout this first area. If you go left, if you go right, you'll have a different source of mobs. I didn't mention that, but if you take a look at the map, you're actually going to see that you can go left or right in this dungeon, choosing to go to either the Trinity first, or you can go to the Light Hunter first. Now, one thing I want to point out is they have added a like class buff in here similar to Priory. It's called a Light-Starved Blossom. I'm not a fan of these mechanics. Actually, I should take that back. I'm a very big fan of these mechanics, but not when they're class-based. I think Blizzard did a really good job in Season 1 and partly season, I guess throughout the War Within, but it depends on the dungeon. Cinderbrew Meadery, if you were an engineer, goblin, or gnome race, you were able to use the little flamethrower. If you were a tailor in Arakara, you were able to use like the stun. If you were a blacksmith warrior, I think there's one more, but if you were like either of those, you could use the thing in Stone Vault. I think Blizzard, those buffs are cool, in my opinion, because they're fairly impactful and you don't have to be playing the class to use it. You just have to make an active decision like, okay, I'm a frost mage, but I want to be able to provide my group with a 10% versatility buff or whatever it was in Stone Vault. So I'm going to learn blacksmithing. I'm going to like spend some time outside of the dungeon leveling it up. So when we come in here, I can now provide my group with this buff for a short period of time. Now in Priory, I think this is a bad example. It's only paladins and priests who can access the buff. Now, of course, it is a minor gain. They ended up tuning it. It was originally overpowered as fuck. And Blizzard did a good job at rolling that back to basically like if you don't have one, it's you very, very barely notice it. Maybe as like a tank. So yeah, I hope they change this. I think it should include something like enchanters or something along those lines. But having it just for classes, it has to then be very, 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 very weak. The one thing I do like, though, is where it's positioned. It's kind of like out of the way. Like you have to pull an extra pack to get this, where in Priory, you don't necessarily have to pull an extra pack to get it. Anyways, we're going to talk about the Trinity first after that long-winded rant. So this is a 3-target council-style fights that has a caster you're going to want to interrupt. You have this guy who casts Thornblade, which will port behind a random player, applying a dot to them. And then you have a dash coming out you're going to need to dodge. And on normal, which is the difficulty that I'm showing this on, that's it. There's nothing else you really need to do here. The boss will eventually spawn like a giant bloom, Lightblossom Bloom Beam Why did I throw bloom in there? Just a beam, it spawns a plant, and now it's just gonna do some, it's gonna pulse for some damage. That's it. And so now it's like a light healer check. And that's pretty much it. Now on Mythic, that Thornblade is gonna do AoE, and that's pretty much it. So nothing too crazy from this fight. Now, what I like about this fight, or this dungeon design, is that basically once you defeat the first boss, road to the next boss is literally just a bridge with 1 pack on it. I hope they don't do anything where it's like 2 packs or 3 packs. I like kind of like going from boss to boss. But let's talk about Ikuzz the Light Hunter. This is like a Tyrannosaurus Rex kind of looking mob, ugly ass motherfucker. And his mechanics I think are really cool. Of course, this is normal. He's gonna start with a knockback, kind of showing you like, hey, this man is here to tussle. But then what he ends up doing is he spawns a bunch of roots. You can remove the roots with like freedom and stuff, but then he ends up fixating a player. And that fixated player needs to like kite the boss over the roots, keeping the room clean. So when the next knockback does come, your group has room to not get rooted, because getting rooted does obviously a lot of damage, and you don't want to do that. I think fights like this are really simple. I don't want to rant too much about this, but I think having everyone assigned, like having tasks in a fight is really good. I don't like it when fights are really one-dimensional, where it's like, this is a healer fight. Like if your healer's bad, you're gonna wipe. If you can't meet the DPS check, you're gonna wipe. If your tank is just like not good at using defensives or doesn't have like the right trinket set up, you're gonna wipe. Those types of designs I think are really flat and aren't fun, because if you're that player, let's say you're the healer and you mess up, or maybe you're just not that good, and you get to that fight and you wipe, and then everyone's like kind of blaming you, that doesn't feel good either. And it's nice to have kind of that shared responsibility. So on a fight like that, it's nice because everyone has to kind of partake in the fight and do something. Anyways, once you defeat that boss, you're going to be flying down to like the lower level, and you're going to be heading towards the Lightwarden Ruia, I believe is maybe how you say that. I also did not major in World of Warcraft lingo, so I often mispronounce things. There's a lot of mobs down here that you have not seen yet, really. These like thorn maws are just like these big bulky rhinoceros. These big bulky men. They do like a little tank buster here, and yeah, that's kind of it. There's also a bunch of like raptors and little buzzing bee boys and a couple of mobs that we've seen before, but for the most part, you're just gonna need to clear the boss platform before taking on the boss, because, well, this boss has some shit going on. Now, what's interesting about clearing this boss platform is that the mobs kind of leave a pool when they die. I don't know how long it lasts, but if you're clearing this room and then pulling boss immediately, like you're gonna have some like space that you can't work with right away. So you definitely want to be careful. I can definitely see a world where you're going to end up pulling the boss and then pulling a lot of this trash onto boss, because the boss isn't that complicated. And I always like me a good simple boss where you can pull trash on. It's probably like my favorite part about dungeons is when you can start getting, when you can get so effective at the dungeon that you can start pulling trash and bosses together. That feels really good. So once you're ready to pull the boss, this is similar to like Tindril. This guy's just a druid who shapeshifts. I'm assuming based on health percentages, and based on whatever form he's in is the type of abilities he's going to cast. Now on normal, he starts in Moonkin form, and he does some casts at the tank, and he spawns this like this lightfall like circles, and then he puts a circle on a player, and then when that player, the debuff expires, it shoots out tornadoes in each direction. So like a very dumbed down Tindril fight. When he hits 50%, he turns into a bear, where he starts doing like a tank buster bleed, and he starts doing pulverizing strikes, which is a set of frontals at random people. And the people who are targeted by the frontals will have arrows over their head, which is a nice indicator, a prerequisite to making sure you're spread out. And then, notably, on Mythic, what ends up happening is he casts Convoke the Spirits, the druid ability. I know, ooh. So it'll have him doing abilities from both forms throughout the fight until he dies. So that is the Mythic mechanic currently. Can't test it because it's not available. Finishing up the dungeon, you're going to be heading towards, obviously, like the last boss. You get to kind of choose whether you want to go right or down to the left. But before you do that, you're going to be in the POTATOAD matriarch is going to show up and take on your group. Now, this guy had to be designed by the same person who made Bubbles, because he's just like, look at him. He's a goofball. So he's pretty simple. Does like a big tank knockback, spawns some eggs you have to destroy before they hatch, and does this toxic spew that causes Lua errors. This is a like poison dots. Obviously, things that can remove poisons are going to be pretty good for this. We're going to have to see on scaling. It doesn't see, I don't know if you can actually skip this guy. Like combat kind of started immediately right when he jumped. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. But like I said, you can choose to go down to the left into the river, or you can go up on like the regular path. I decided to go down to the riverbank to see what was down here. Also, generally followers are a little bit better when they're in a crevasse instead of upstairs, because knowing this hunter, this Austin Huxworth guy, he's just going to jump into the river regardless of which way I go. So the rest of the mobs you're going to see through here are just different variations of what we've already pulled. The only thing that's, I guess, new are these hydras. I don't know what they do. They kind of channel this light beam that has you spread out. It reminds me a little bit of like the mobs from Streets, the enforcers that like force your group to spread out a little bit before you go into the oasis. And then, yeah, you're going to be clearing all the way down to the boss. Now, the one thing that is, you could definitely like walk around this big pack here, which is really obnoxious. There's a bunch of casters in this pack. I ended up pulling it, not thinking it was all going to pull together. And then they all just started casting on me. So they are currently linked, but I believe you can technically just walk around this pack. Unless you have like a prop paladin or a DK that can grip things up nice and easily or keep things silenced. I think this pack is going to be obnoxious to say the least. And then finally, we are on to Ziekket, the big tree light man. I don't know what this guy's doing, but he looks kind of spooky. I really like the aesthetic of this dungeon though. This like whole light plant vibe, paladin plant. So what he's going to do is he's going to spawn a bunch of little ads. They have to be kicked, silenced, whatever. And then you want to kill them before the concentrated light beam that's going to come out is going to target the tank. Now, what's going to happen is the first time these guys spawn, they're able to be kicked and interrupted, which is good. The next time they spawn, they won't be so lucky. Or you won't be so lucky. Basically, once these mobs die, he's going to target the tank with this concentrated light beam, which you then need to aim at the ads on the ground. And as you can see here, I actually ended up missing 2 of them. So what's going to happen in a couple of seconds is they're going to respawn and they're going to be uninterruptible. I also love that 2 of the DPS in the fight are just like AFK on the far side. And so basically, yeah, you want to make sure you're hitting all the ads with that concentrated beam, or you're eventually going to get overrun. Now, notably, the healer just has rot damage to deal with every 3 seconds. It's just going to pulse from the boss. Thorn Spike is the tank buster. It applies a nice nasty dot to the tank, so you want to be aware of that. And then on Mythic, the Mythic mechanic is actually going to have, he's going to spawn, the boss is supposedly going to spawn some orbs, and they're going to float towards the boss. And then what you need to do is you need to, like, it sounds like you need to soak them. If they happen to touch the boss, he's going to gain a shield and he's going to have increased damage done. So you don't want to have that happen. So yeah, that is the dungeon, by the way. That is the Blinding Vale. I hope you guys enjoyed this first look. This was an interesting dungeon. I think the dungeon lacks appeal at the start. It just seems like your average dungeon. But I feel like once you get to the first boss, it kind of opens up a bit. It feels a little less linear. The boss design, I think, is generally good for, I guess, a first draft of it. And I'm looking forward to testing this dungeon in maybe future weeks. If there's any kind of updates, if we can test on Mythic at all, that'd be nice, even though it's not a Mythic Plus dungeon. But yeah, let me know what your guys' thoughts are down below. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.